Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Hami and these are the headlines. The Pakistan Army says India is using terrorism as a tool to destabilize its neighboring countries. In a press briefing, military's media wing spokesperson said India's hegemonic designs and racist ideology is jeopardizing peace in South Asia. Major General Babar Iftikhar said India is systematically trying to change the demography of occupied Kashmir. He went on to say 16 civilians have been killed and over 150 wounded in India's ceasefire violations along the LOC this year. In Lebanon, the parliament has approved a two-week state of emergency that grants sweeping powers to the army, citing the exceptional circumstances in the country following a massive explosion in Beirut earlier this month. The state of emergency allows the army to curb free speech, freedom of assembly and press, as well as to arrest anyone deemed as a security threat. The country has been rocked by violent protests over the explosion that left over 200 dead and more than 6,000 injured. An Israeli airstrike has hit a school run by the UN Refugee Agency in Gaza City. Witnesses say the missile didn't explode but caused damages to the school building. Earlier, the Israeli army said its warplanes bombed Hamas positions over the launch of explosive balloons. Those were the headlines and detailed stories. Right after a short break, stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. The Pakistan Army says India is using terrorism as a tool to destabilize its neighboring countries. In a press briefing, military's media wing spokesperson said India's hegemonic designs and racist ideology is jeopardizing peace in South Asia. Major General Babar Iftikhar said Pakistan Army is fully aware of India's intentions and is fully capable of responding to any threat. The spokesman added that India is systematically trying to change the demography of occupied Kashmir. He said genocide is being done and human rights are being violated through India's state terrorism in the occupied region. He went on to say 16 civilians have been killed and over 150 wounded in 1,927 ceasefire violations by India along the LOC this year. Responding to a question, he said Pakistan shares good ties with Saudi Arabia and will continue to do so. Touching upon other regional issues, the spokesperson said Pakistan played a pivotal role for the Afghan peace. He hoped that the warring sides in Afghanistan will soon start intra-Afghan talks. Pakistan's coronavirus death rate continues to decline as 10 people have died from the coronavirus during the past 24 hours, bringing the toll to 6,139. The Health Ministry says 753 new infections have been reported in a day. The country's total number of active cases is 16,475, whereas over 264,000 people have recovered so far. As the country reports a remarkable 91% recovery rate. The country has over 1,800 ventilators, of which only 144 are currently occupied by critical patients. With 735 hospitals with COVID facilities, Pakistan's healthcare facilities are fully equipped in dealing with the pandemic. In the US, 1,500 people have died from COVID-19 in the past 24 hours, taking the toll to over 166,000 with more than 5 million cases. While Brazil's death toll has risen by 1,175 to over 104,000. Globally, over 749,000 people have lost their lives to the coronavirus, with more than 20.5 million infected. This report has more.
The COVID-19 raging through Americas, India, South Africa is now causing worries in parts of Europe and Australia. Deaths in Latin America continues to pile up as the overwhelmed healthcare systems crumble. Deaths in Latin America continue to pile up as the overwhelmed healthcare system crumbles under a load of thousands testing positive every day. Mexico has recorded 737 deaths overnight, increasing the tally to over 54,000. Despite leading the world in death toll and number of cases, US President Donald Trump insists on reopening schools in the country.
I feel very badly for him. And I have a feeling that on November 4th, somebody's going to announce schools are open, the country's open, everything's open. I really believe a lot of it's done for political reasons, if you want to know the truth. I think so.
England is using a new contact tracing app for logging the spread of the virus as new spikes in Spain and Italy sound alarm bells in the region. Elsewhere, Australia is struggling to contain the second wave as Victoria and Melbourne continue to report hundreds of new cases. Over in New Zealand, authorities are scrambling to trace the source of a new outbreak in the country as fresh lockdown restrictions are imposed.
There are 13 new confirmed cases of COVID-19 to report in the community. They are all in Auckland and they are all linked to the 4 people who we reported as confirmed cases yesterday and the day before. We will put the details of these cases up on our website as we have in the past. That means we now have a total of 14 new confirmed cases to report today.
Mainland China has reported 19 new cases, down from 25 the previous day. South Korea has recorded 56 new infections as local transmission continues to be a spot of concern for authorities.
India has reported another record spike in COVID-19 cases with 67,000 testing positive in the past 24 hours. The virus epicenter of Asia, India has the world's 3rd highest infections of nearly 2.4 million. The health ministry said 942 people have died overnight, increasing the death toll to over 47,000. India has also reported one of the highest infections in doctors as well, as the virus continues to exhaust the country's already overwhelmed system. At a hospital in Bihar's Bhagalpur, there is only one doctor to tend to a burgeoning number of patients.
There should be at least 4 doctors posted here, but there are only 3 here, and one of them has been sent on deputation. The other one has tested positive for coronavirus, and so I am the only one left here.
India's former President Pranab Mukherjee continues to be on ventilator support, while Cabinet Minister Shripad Naik has also tested positive for the virus. Now moving on, in India, Bengaluru, an emergency law prohibiting gatherings has been imposed after 3 people were killed in clashes over blasphemous social media posts. The victims were Muslim men aged between 19 and 21. Baton-wielding police are on patrol through barricaded and deserted streets in parts of the southern Indian tech hub. Police say along with 110 protesters, the person responsible for the offensive post has been arrested. This incident adds to the rising Hindu extremism in India under Prime Minister Narendra Modi's RSS-inspired Bharatiya Janata Party. Last year, New Delhi enacted a discriminatory citizenship law, sparking violent protests across the country. The Taliban claim they have reliable intelligence information that ISIS intends to attack their prisoners after their release from a Police Chowki jail in Kabul. The Taliban spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid said the aim was to disrupt intra-Afghan negotiations. He asked Kabul to take the threat seriously and ensure all the measures necessary to prevent the attack. President Ashraf Ghani has signed a decree for the release of the remaining 400 Taliban prisoners to pave the way for intra-Afghan talks. Once the inmates are released, the negotiations will most likely start in Doha. In Lebanon, the parliament has approved a 2-week state of emergency that grants sweeping powers to the army, citing the exceptional circumstances in the country following a massive explosion in Beirut last week. The state of emergency allows the army to curb free speech, freedom of assembly and press, as well as to arrest anyone deemed a security threat. Only one parliamentarian out of a 119-member chamber opposed the decision. The country has been rocked by violent protests over the explosion that left more than 200 dead and more than 6,000 injured. Even Prime Minister Hassan Diab's resignation failed to pacify the protesters. In the first legislative session since the blast, Lebanon's parliament speaker called for a quick formation of a new government. The US says the Iranian Navy briefly seized a Liberian-flagged oil tanker near the strategic Strait of Hormuz. The US military released a black and white video showing special forces fast roping down from a helicopter onto the tanker in eastern coast of the UAE. They said the Iranian Navy held the vessel, named MV Villa, for nearly 5 hours before releasing it. The US military Central Command said the vessel had made no distress calls before, during and after the seizure. It said the Iranian helicopter involved appeared to be a Sikorsky SH-3 Sea King, which only Iran's Navy operates. Neither Iran nor the UAE have responded to the US claim yet. An Israeli airstrike has hit a school run by the UN Refugees Agency in Gaza City. No casualties have been reported so far. Witnesses say the missile didn't explode but caused damage to the school building. Hamas spokesperson Fawzi Barhoum has condemned the attack, saying Israel's actions are escalating an already volatile situation in the region. Earlier today, the Israeli army said its warplanes bombed Hamas positions over launching of explosive balloons. Meanwhile, Israel's Defense Minister Benny Gantz ordered a halt to fuel imports into Gaza over the alleged balloon attacks. More stories to follow, but right after a short break. Stay tuned. The US President Donald Trump and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Advan have discussed ways to achieve a demilitarized zone in central Libya over a telephone call. The US Embassy in Libya said the two leaders also discussed a complete withdrawal of the foreign forces and mercenaries from Libya. This discussion over a phone call was followed by a visit from US envoy Richard Noland to senior Turkish officials in Ankara. The meeting in Ankara also underscored the importance of a UN-facilitated political dialogue with full respect for Libya's sovereignty. Earlier in the week, Noland visited Cairo, where he discussed ways to bring peace to the war-torn North African nation with Egyptian officials. Turkey says it is ready to cooperate with Iraq to eliminate the Kurdistan Workers' Party in the region. The foreign ministry says PKK presence also threatens Iraq, and it is Baghdad's responsibility to take measures against the militants. In a statement, the ministry said Turkey will continue cross-border operations against the fighters if Iraq does not act. It said Ankara is determined to take the measures it deems necessary for its border security, no matter where it may be. The PKK took up arms against the Turkish state in 1984. Turkey holds the militants responsible for killing some 40,000 people in a 30-year conflict. Greece says it is ready to enter a dialogue with Turkey to resolve the issue of the Eastern Mediterranean as per the international laws. Earlier, Turkish Defense Minister Hulusi Akar proposed the talks, saying Ankara wants to be a good neighbor to Athens. In a televised address, Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis said the talks must not be under a climate of tension and provocation. He said Greece seeks to build bridges of peace and good faith, but will not stand any blackmail. Meanwhile, France says it will temporarily increase its military presence in the Eastern Mediterranean in the coming days. In a statement, President Emmanuel Macron said the step has been taken in view of the escalating tensions between Greece and Turkey. The two NATO allies disagree over overlapping claims to hydrocarbon resources in the region. Russia's President Vladimir Putin has urged Azerbaijan and Armenia to avoid actions that could inflame tensions. Earlier in July, tensions along the Azerbaijan-Armenia border escalated, killing 11 Azeris and 6 Armenians. The Russian state media says Putin discussed regional issues with his Azeri counterpart Ilham Aliyev in a phone call. It said the presidents also exchanged views on the worsening situation on the Azeri and Armenian state border. For his part, President Aliyev congratulated Putin on the registration of a coronavirus vaccine. Kremlin said the two leaders also discussed strengthening bilateral partnership in all areas. A Russian fighter jet has intercepted a US plane and a maritime patrol aircraft over the Black Sea. In a statement, the Defense Ministry said its aircraft approached the US planes at a safe distance and prevented them from violating Russia's state border. The ministry said the intercepted planes were a reconnaissance aircraft, US RC-135 and a P-8A maritime patrol aircraft. It said the actions of Russian warplane were in strict compliance with the international rules for the use of airspace. The ministry said its control systems detected 2 targets flying over neutral waters of the Black Sea towards Russia's border yesterday as well. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says Washington is considering sanctioning Belarus over the ongoing violence in the country. More in this report.
Belarus is navigating one of the biggest political crises in its post-Soviet history after the opposition rejected official results of the presidential election. Massive protests followed President Alexander Lukashenko's landslide re-election victory. The US and the European Union also discredited the results of the presidential polls in Belarus over rigging allegations. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says Washington is considering what it can do to multilaterally deliver a good outcome for the Belarusians.
As you said, we were incredibly troubled by the election and deeply disappointed that it wasn't more free and more fair. We've seen this behavior before, and we regret that this is how it's transpired. Then we've watched the violence in the aftermath, peaceful protesters being treated in ways that are inconsistent with how they should be treated.
The UN has also condemned the use of violence by Belarusian authorities on peaceful demonstrations. UN Human Rights Chief said police were reported to have used excessive force on the protesters. Meanwhile, Lithuania, Poland and Latvia have offered to mediate between the Belarusian government and the opposition. Lithuania's president has proposed a 3-point plan to help resolve the situation.
First, the Belarusian government's institutions cease the use of violence against their citizens and de-escalate the situation. Second, Belarusian government releases detainees who are in thousands, all protest participants who have undergone repression up until now. And the third point is Belarusian institutions. Belarus renews dialogue with its civil society.
The European Union has called an extraordinary foreign ministers meeting tomorrow to discuss the situation in Belarus.
In California state of the US, a wildfire in North Los Angeles has forced a mandatory evacuation orders for some 500 homes. State authorities say more than 300 firefighters are battling the flames that have burned over 10,000 acres in just 3 hours. Helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft have also been deployed to fight the blaze. Earlier, the U.S. Department of Agriculture said a firefighter assigned to Stagecoach Fire has died. Wildfires have become more frequent and bigger in California in recent years. In November 2018, over 80 people were killed in the deadliest fire in the state's history, the Camp Fire. A new species of dinosaur related to the Tyrannosaurus rex has been discovered in the south coast of England. In a statement, Southampton University paleontologists said they have spent months studying 4 bones that were found last year on the Isle of Wight. The paleontologists said they have determined that the bones were from the neck, back and tail of a new dinosaur. They named the dinosaur Victeroveneta inopinatus, a name that refers to large hair sacs in some of the bones. Chris Barker, a PhD student at the university, said they were amazed as to how hollow this animal was. He said parts of its skeleton must have been rather delicate. The Isle of Wight is one of the top locations for dinosaur remains and fossils in Europe. Google says it will start detecting earthquakes around the world using the accelerometer sensors in Android phones. In a statement, the company said it will begin warning residents of California about expected turbulence with the rollout of quake alerting technology.
Google says California, Japan, and Mexico already have warning systems that give people seconds to protect themselves before shaking reaches them. It said Indonesia and other countries with less cash for traditional sensors could catch up if the company's product proves effective. Seismology experts said turning smartphones into mini seismographs marked a huge advancement. Over 2.5 billion devices, including some tablets, run Google's Android operating system. Google's principal software engineer, March Strogaitis, said there are hundreds of millions of people that live near the earthquake fault zones. He said if people can get an early notice that an earthquake is coming towards them, they can protect themselves. According to Google, alerts would trigger for earthquakes of magnitudes 4.5 or greater. Meanwhile, the company said systems will not work in China, where Google's Play Services software is blocked.
European markets are trading lower as the US has announced to maintain its tariff on Airbus. Most investors are waiting for the US second pandemic relief package, which is pending approval from the Democrats. London's FTSE 100 has dipped over 1% after the US announced maintaining tariffs on the UK's alcoholic beverages. The Europe stock 600 index edged down. Italy's FTSE MIB, Frankfurt's DAX and Paris's CAC 40 are all trading down fractionally. Early Asian markets declined, as well as with the exception of Japanese shares. In the UEFA Champions League, Paris Saint-Germain beat Atalanta in a nail-biting contest to book their place in the last four. Two injury time goals from Marquinhos and Eric Maxim were enough to help them beat Atalanta 2-1. Mario Pasalic opened the scoring for Atalanta in the first half. PSG were laboring up front with half an hour to go when Kylian Mbappe came on and changed the game. But Marquinhos put PSG level in the last minute of the normal time. In the dying moments of the game, Mbappe slotted home the winner to take his side to the next round.